We would like to welcome you to the NACE Town Hall. We are happy you are here. It is my pleasure to introduce Sean Vanderzeel, Executive Director of NACE.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our town hall. This is the second of our town hall series, and we have several more planned for the coming weeks. We are in an unprecedented time with what's happening in the world, and we want to provide you with timely updates about how various folks are handling the scenarios around them. And so today we have an expert panel of talent acquisition professionals who are in the middle of working through all of the issues that we all are concerned about, and particularly those issues around internships, early talent, and the acquisition of the college educated. So we're going to go through those issues today. Before we dive into the panel, though, we thought we would ground you in some research that NACE has done most recently. Many of you participated in this research, which was a part of our Quick Poll series. That Quick Poll series, the most recent one, ended on March the 31st. And as we know, the last few weeks of March, things were moving really fast and things were truly changing. But I want to provide you with where things left off with that poll. And what we found out was from about 400 of our respondent employers and about 1,000 of our colleges who responded to the survey, that 83% of those employers were adjusting their work environments and moving to work at home. As we know, probably just even over the last 3 days, that has changed yet again. And that number is probably closer to the 100% mark based upon what's happening across the nation. We also found out that 65% of those employers had adjusted their spring recruiting plans. So that's vitally important to the work that you all do. And of that, close to 16% had already eliminated their plans for recruiting for spring altogether. And the vast majority of firms, 74%, had said that they would be continuing their summer internships. Now, again, things have changed quite a bit over the last few days here. Of that, 11% reported that they weren't quite sure what they were going to be doing, and 5% had already decided to cancel their plans for the summer with interns. 2% had reported that they were already shortening the length of internships or reducing the number of interns altogether. There was a quick question, did I say 60 or 16%? And that was 16% had eliminated their plans to recruit this spring. So hopefully that gives us a little bit of background to go off of with our panel. And again, as we know, things are changing moment by moment, day by day, and our expert panelists will give us some more insight into what their firms are doing and what they're hearing out in the field. Those results are posted on the naceweb.org website. And if you go to the coronavirus updates, which is, there's a tile on the main page of naceweb.org, there is a link to the quick poll results. So I hope you'll all go there. Additionally, we have just launched our next quick poll with many more detailed questions that we would love to hear from you all on both the employer and the college side. It's vitally important to all of us for benchmarking purposes that we get as many people as possible to answer those surveys. And so we really hope that you will look in your inbox to find that poll and to help us navigate as we move forward. So with no further ado, I'd like to turn things over to Dave Ong. Dave is from Maximus Corporation, and he's going to be the moderator for today's panel. So Dave, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. And thanks to all of our panelists for, again, agreeing to volunteer some of their time, because I know everybody's in pretty crazy mode these days. So I'd like to start out by asking our panelists how the pandemic has actually impacted the recruiting strategies at their respective firms, at least in the short term. Maybe we could start out with Kayla.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you everybody for joining the panel today. I'll start first by setting a little bit of context. For those of you that know who SAS is, or maybe some of you do not, we are a data analytics organization based just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we do quite a bit of student recruiting, both for internships as well as for entry level, usually about 400 a year. So that should set a little bit of context as to what I'm about to share. Our recruitment strategy has significantly changed, obviously, because of COVID, but I think we're all here on this webinar for a reason, and that we want answers. And I think one of the things that makes this feel okay is that we are all in this together. And honestly, I'm not sure that there's a perfect answer for our unprecedented circumstance that we're working through right now. I will say we're having to pivot, we're having to be nimble, we're having to take a step back and look at our open positions and make sure that the ones that we do have available are going to make sense for us moving forward from a recruitment standpoint. We're having to be adaptable. Immediately, we've had to switch all of our recruitment to be more of a virtual method of delivery in terms of interviews. We are a customer of a video interviewing technology that we've had to implement more broadly globally to all of our recruiters and enable about our 40+ person recruitment team on how to conduct virtual interviews, as well as obviously our internal hiring managers as well. I think one thing, many of you on the line might be from more of a career services than an employer standpoint, but a lot of what the recruiting strategy is driven by is our revenue and where we see our business opportunities in the future. That's how companies kind of determine where to invest from open positions. And right now, so much of that is so uncertain while everything's kind of changing day by day in everything that we're doing. So, not just speaking on behalf of SAS, but of most employers, it's really right now, we're very heads down trying to predict what the future is going to look like. And I don't think any of us have that crystal ball. In taking a look at some of the Q&A that's been coming through at the point that we started, the one thing that is on everybody's minds are internship programs. So how are we shifting our intern program in our organization? And I'll kind of speak broadly. Based in Research Triangle Park, I've been doing some calls with other employers, and it seems that most employers are taking one of three stances. They're either choosing to turn their intern program virtual and doing an assessment of their workforce and their hiring needs to make sure that any of the internships that have been hired, the work can be done remotely. So that's kind of option one. Option two of what I'm seeing is internships getting canceled. Maybe, some programs, including SAS's, it's a 7-figure line item in our budget. So we are having to look at expenses, and some companies are making that decision. The third piece that I've seen kind of a shift from a strategy of an intern program would be pushing out start dates. But unfortunately, we're still operating in this gray area that we don't know exactly when some of these bans are going to be lifted in terms of working remotely. So, none of us have a perfect answer. And I think that's one of the things that we're all trying to work through as employers is what is going to be our next step and how do we effectively communicate both internally within our teams, but then externally as well with our students. So our strategy is completely shifting and it's changing day by day, hour by hour as we're all going through getting the updates from our government. That's shifting day by day and hour by hour. So to answer the question, a lot of virtual obviously taking place, a lot of assessment of our business needs and trying to predict the best that we can what the future is going to look like, and really having to pivot and get creative around what makes sense for intern programs. I'll end by saying that for our specific intern program at SAS, we have made the decision that we are going virtual, and SAS is not a very big environment for work from home culture in general. We have a beautiful sprawling campus where most people do come into the office. So there's a lot of change management involved in this from interns and hiring managers. So we're spending a lot of time right now understanding what that's going to look like. But we are also, making sure that any internship that does go virtual, that we are making sure that the students have valuable work and, still working through our communication plan internally and externally on that. But that is the initial stance that we are planning to take here in the future.
Great, thank you, Kayla. Can we pivot over to Celdric over at JP Morgan Chase to talk about some of the challenges he's seeing as well?
Sure, thanks, Dave. So Celdric Blocker here. Hi, everyone. So good to have you on the phones and participating today. So I'm with JP Morgan Chase, and so hopefully you're familiar with us, but we are a financial services firm, one of the world's largest financial services firm. And so we're experiencing, everything that everyone else is experiencing. Kayla mentioned a lot of things that we're having to think through as an industry, and it's really interesting. It's unique. It's presenting a lot of challenges. It's also presenting a lot of different opportunities. So a lot of what we're thinking through is going to be determined by where we are. So we're kind of a little bit at the mercies of the pandemic. We're a little bit at the mercy of the local government and different municipalities. And then we're also a little bit at the mercy of what does the intern want to do? What makes sense for their families and what are they hearing at home? So we are exploring all options, trying to learn every day what this new environment looks like, how we pivot. Some things we have started to do already from a recruitment standpoint. So we already use a virtual interviewing platform. We host a lot of different webinars, and we host a lot of different targeted discussions virtually. So some of that work has already begun with our recruitment process. We did make the decision to cancel a number of on-campus or in-office activities for everyone's safety for the months of March and for the month of April. But we're also trying to figure out, once we figure out what the course is or the direction for the intern program, we also need to start thinking through the intern program for 2021. And so lots of conversations taking place, lots of things happening, exploring all options. But we also know that within financial services, we typically do use the springtime of the year. So now is when we will be on campus to start marketing opportunities for the 2021 internship program. And so I know we'll speak at a little bit later about some of the things, how we can partner with our friends and colleagues within the university relations and college career services standpoint. But some information we're having to figure out, because we're all dependent upon what the academic school year is going to look like. How does that take into or how do we take that into consideration? So we're exploring all options like everyone else, and trying to figure out what's the best course so that we can have the best experience for everyone involved. We're a global organization. We have interns all across the globe. So there's a lot of things that we're thinking through as it relates to those individuals and their experiences, so on and so forth. So I'll end there saying, very similar. We're just thinking through everything, but want to make sure that in thinking through everything, we are taking in everyone's perspective, that being our friends at colleges and universities, our interns, their families, and all of the things that everyone is going through.
Thank you, Celdric. It sounds like one of the things that's becoming quite obvious is that there's an enormous amount of change management taking place within these university relations teams. Bruce, I was wondering if you could actually walk through some of the strategies that you're actually having to employ over at Travelers these days.
Yeah, sure, Dave, happy to. Hi, everyone. Bruce Saltis, Head of Talent Sourcing at Travelers Insurance. We're based in Hartford, Connecticut. We have about a 450 person internship program planned for this summer, about 25 different locations throughout the entire US. So, this is, to your point, a crash course in change management, I would say. Kayla, you talked a little bit about that. From a SaaS perspective, but undoubtedly, warp speed change management. And I think a lot of folks, are thinking about the change management that you need to take when you're talking about shifting work from work that has been in person to virtual. But I think a lot of the change management before you even get to that component is, can our business absorb, or what is the work that our business is going to, have based on this? There are some industries that are hit much harder and faster than others. So that is certainly an element of it. But once you move past that and make the decision, okay, we are shifting to a virtual model, I think the biggest change management strategy that we've seen is getting that buy-in from senior leadership. So a lot of the conversations in and around what the options are for us right now, because we haven't made a decision, we do plan to make one in the middle of April. But from a change management perspective, we've presented the case to our senior leaders to say, if we have to go down this path from a virtual work standpoint, the main question is, can this work be done virtually? I think a lot of managers are not comfortable with the notion of interns doing the work virtually because they're so new to the organization. And it's easy to gravitate towards that conversation, but we've really tried to focus them on, let's not talk about, comfort level and things like that. Let's talk about, can that work be done virtually? Frankly, what we've seen is a lot of the change management that is going to have to happen is internal to our own organization. I think the students are used to operating in this virtual digital world. They've been forced into it during this semester of work. And, so a lot of our change management strategies are very much internal, introspective facing. And as we come to decisions, we're making sure that the senior leaders are bought in, they understand why, and they can communicate that message down to their organizations and support the decisions that we make if we end up going virtually. So that's what we've seen just from a change management perspective at this point.
Thank you, Bruce. Siobhan, would you like to add something to that as well from what we're seeing at Danaher Corporation?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, Javon Rockman with Danaher Corporation. We're a science and technology company in healthcare space, medical devices, water quality, water purification, packaging. And so for us with this change to a virtual, it has been tough, right? We're not going on campus anymore. We're not doing those campus events. We're not doing site interviews. However, we're still looking to fill all these roles. The early career kind of programs that we recruit for are a kind of quote unquote protected group. So we're still ensuring that demand is filled. So we're ensuring that we're meeting weekly with the university recruiting team, ensuring that we still have this pipeline for whichever roles that are still needed, ensuring that any kind of countermeasures that are needed to be in place, we're escalating those to those proper stakeholders to ensure that those roadblocks are mitigated. So we're taking all these steps to ensure that we're still supporting these businesses with early technical talent, and ensuring that again the business is moving forward.
Great, thanks, Siobhan. Just to the folks that are actually on the call, just to let you know, we are monitoring all your questions in the chat room right now. A few of these are topics that are actually going to be reviewed in the next question or so, but we are trying to keep our portion of it down to about 2:30 or so, and then we're actually going to move to your questions. So please take notes. The next question that we have for our panelists is that we're seeing a lot of transformation of processes and practices for the interns, the new hires that are coming to these organizations. Can you walk through how you're actually approaching certain topics such as communicating with internal teams, which we've talked about a little bit. I think a lot of folks are asking questions about how we're going to be onboarding interns and new hires. And then we also want to talk about how what types of engagement strategies are working with interns and new hires. So I thought maybe we'd start off with Bruce, if that would be okay.
Sure. So here at Travelers, again, we have not made a final decision. We're mulling over a number of different options. That being said, the first time our internal teams and internal new hires hear from us won't be when we make that decision. We have sent out 2 or 3 communications since the pandemic sort of, has escalated throughout the month of March to let folks know where we're at in our decision-making process. Each message has given them a date on when we plan to check in next. Each message talks about how we're handling our current staff. Each message talks about some of the things or options that we are discussing internally about what may be part of our final intern program. So we've tried to be very transparent from the very beginning letting both our internal teams as well as the interns and new hires know where we are at, right? Our program really kicks off that first week of June. And the first message I think we sent out was the day before it was declared, I think it was declared, I don't know, I forget the dates. It's, you know, time is lost on me right now. But it was that second week of March. We sent out another note last week. And again, letting them know what our timeline is. And I think there's a lot of hesitancy from organizations to send out a note or communicate anything until they have a final plan in place. But I think that I think there's a downside to that personally, and I would communicate and be as transparent as possible with just what some of your internal conversations are looking like, letting them know how your current staff are being handled. The responses we've gotten from interns and upcoming hires has been, thank you so much for thinking of us. We really appreciate the insight. We really haven't gotten a lot of questions tacked onto that. We tried to be as methodical and thorough in that communication. So don't be afraid to start reaching out and letting them know where you're at in your process and when they can expect to hear from you. A simple communication like that can really go a long way. As far as the onboarding piece, right, there are several elements to the onboarding piece. There's, I-9 paperwork. There is, we are a company that drug tests, right? So you have to have changes to that policy because people can't leave their house to go to labs. So we've consulted with our employee relations partners, our legal partners, et cetera. We're starting to see now on background checks, courts are closed. So you have to then understand what that does to your background check process. We've been in close communication with our supply chain and technology teams. I've seen numbers about 65 to 70% decrease in computer equipment being available because of it, emanating in China. And so what impact does that have on your supply chain so that when you have all these folks starting, will they have the right equipment? So all of these things, are coming into play. It is a definite partnership with not only the tech and the supply chain, the legal teams, but also with our training organization, our learning and development team. Obviously, a lot of the in-person classes that they have typically have the responsibility of teaching are canceled. So we've leveraged some of their capacity to help us with some of that virtual onboarding to ensure, a robust experience, given that in-person is not available. So definitely make use of the partnerships within your existing organization that may have some time because other things have moved on their plate.
Great. Siobhan, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to clarify, so my role, I manage our rotational development programs, our global programs. So support our full-time, support our recruiting efforts to fill those. For our full-time programs, we have about 150 or so program associates. For our internship program, about 75 per year. So as far as just to Bruce's point, transparency is just paramount for these associates, a lot of uncertainties and such. So just letting them know, one of the things that we've done is having a group me and having all of our intern and program associates, each separate program, together in this group me and just saying, hey, like, we're going to keep you guys up to date with all things that we know with COVID happening, what the state of the businesses are. It's also just a chance to keep them engaged in terms of, right, a lot of these students have options. I know ghosting is a thing with these program associates. So we also use that platform to, first of all, create this sense of community before even they start their full-time or internship, but also use it as a chance to sell the business. So with Danaher, one of our operating companies, one of our businesses, was the first company to have its test for coronavirus be approved by the FDA. So selling those types of wins, another business was able to create a key component for the test as well. So just kind of highlighting and touting those successes is something that we're doing to continue to engage them. But again, just letting them know what the plan is, what some uncertainties that we have, but letting them know that we are thinking of them, and then letting them know again what will happen as of next. And then again to elaborate on Bruce, again, a lot of these kind of in-person events might not be happening. So again, looking at kind of those virtual options. I know some of the trainings that we have, there's an element of it being kind of like a compliance training where you have X amount of days to take all these tests related to the tests, to the learnings, or do a more kind of stretched out training that's just condensed to a couple hours per day, where they can all come together as this cohort and go through those types of training. So we're playing with the different options to ensure that, again, we're engaging these associates, helping them develop and ensure that they're supporting these businesses.
Right. Thank you, Siobhan. To all the panelists, one of the questions that seems to be coming up on the chat board is that obviously the organizations that we have represented and our panelists are all very forward thinking. They know what they're doing in this space, and they're actually contacting candidates and having some type of communication with them. Do you have any advice for a student that has not heard from their respective organization from whom they've accepted an offer, either as an intern or full-time hire? Is there a best way for them to actually approach their employer? What kind of advice would you give those students?
I can start. This is Saldrick with JP Morgan. I would say, obviously hopefully they've made some connections along the recruitment process. So I would say just reach out to their recruiter, their points of contact. If that doesn't work, then Career Services, I'm sure, has some connectivity with the university relations team or the campus recruiting team at that particular company. I know I've gotten some personal emails from students that I've met along the way that have asked, hey, how are things going? How are you holding up? And I think the more we can humanize the process, the better. And I just let them know, hey, I'm in my apartment and I'm cooking a lot more than I used to. I am doing things a little bit differently. And we haven't figured everything out yet for the internship program, but you should be hearing something soon. If you want to chat, just let me know. And I think that that's fun. I think, if there's a beauty in all of this, is we're all going through it together. It's not industry specific. It's not person specific. So I think we don't have to, some of the rules of some of the hierarchies that may have been in place, they're just not in place anymore. And I think, the more we can open up those communications, most companies have proactively reached out to their interns to say, hey, this is what we're thinking. We don't have everything figured out.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead. And I think that's a great segue. So
Well, Saldrick, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I really do think that this is where we need your help, for those of you that are on the phone for Career Services. And, those on the line, we do have some plans in place. And, again, there's no perfect answer here. But what we could really use your help on is educating students about the time that we're in and having them kind of understand the bigger picture of where we're all at. I think everybody that's in university recruiting at a corporation and at a company is in university recruiting because they love working with students. And there's nothing more painful than some of these decisions that I'm seeing some companies have to make around, taking back offers or canceling internships. And I think that personally is really challenging for the university recruiters and those that know that this is going to have an impact on the life of the student. So where we could use your help is, if a student hasn't heard back, obviously guiding them to the conversations, to the point that Saldrick said around reaching out to a recruiter. I think that's a fantastic direction. I also do think too, helping them ease their anxiety as well a little bit, and helping them understand the situation and kind of the why behind what's taking place, and that it's the number one thing that's on their mind, absolutely, because the internship is quickly approaching. But sometimes within companies, it does take a little while for you to completely pivot and get the decisions that you need from your executive team, especially when your executives are on the front lines right now trying to figure out how the business is even going to move forward from a revenue standpoint, and just from a total direction standpoint, and thinking about their current employees. Right now they might have some immediate priorities that they're focused on right now. And while, everybody on the call today, again, from a panelist standpoint, this is their number one priority. I don't want to speak behalf on all the rest of the panelists, but one thing that I've struggled with internally is it's 100% my number one priority. But for the executives that we need to make decisions on some of this, it might not be their number one priority right now. So with that, we might need a little bit of patience. We might need a little bit of grace, and understanding that if you don't have an answer, it's not because you're not on the minds of the company. It's just because they might be working through some other priorities at the current moment. And I know that's easier said than done, but I've just spoken to so many university recruiters and leaders in university recruiting over the past week or so that are just, struggling because they want to provide students an answer. And internally, it's just challenging to make it happen with everything that's happening within organizations right now.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee. There's a lot of chatter on the chat box, and Kayla, you kind of touched on it a little bit as well in terms of reaching out to some of the schools that you partner with from a recruiting strategy standpoint. Are there any pieces of advice you can be providing to your career services partners in terms of what they can be doing in terms of working with the students, what kind of messaging should be going out there? And are there any decisions that you've made in collaboration with any of your career centers? Would love to hear some of those strategies as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Dave. And I think we just hit on probably one of the biggest ones, is helping students understand the current state of what's happening and why, and that if their internship is canceled, you know, it's a really tough decision for the employer, and that's not something that they want to be doing. And it's not, you know, only a revenue decision. In a lot of cases, there's just so many different moving factors. Prepping students on virtual work. If you use Zoom within your career center, maybe you could run some webinars on how to communicate via Zoom and how to present yourself well on a video conference and camera. You know, as companies are starting to look through enablement for our interns as well as hiring managers, we have a lot of things in mind, but if you could get them a little bit comfortable and a little bit warm in what it is like to work virtually, that would be incredibly helpful. And help us get creative. To answer the second part of your question, Dave, I have not yet had a collaborative partnership with career services in solving some of these problems yet, but I would love to. I would love to get creative with some career services professionals around how we can help the students right now. I know in our weekly team meetings, and the university recruiting team is actually meeting on a daily basis right now, just given how quickly things are changing. We're always talking about how can we help the student right now. We understand that students might have had graduation canceled, and that March Madness might have gotten canceled, and that might be the #1 thing that they were looking forward to in their schools. And this is a really hard time for the students. And how can we come together to help them, whether it's writing blogs on what to do when their internship gets canceled, or, you know, SAS now has free training that we've put out into the universe that is typically thousands of dollars to complete. And maybe we could get awareness for students that get their internship canceled, that there's opportunities to learn and grow without having an internship. But we need help, and we need your help more than ever on how do we do what's right by the student in these circumstances, because they mean a lot to us, and we wouldn't be in this career if they didn't. And then last, I would say helping to emphasize the importance of adaptability with your students, and knowing that with things changing every single day, the answers might not be black and white. And that's okay. And they're building a skill right now of being adaptable in current times. And I think that message, if that's shared to the students through you all, it would help us in what we're doing right now tremendously.
Great.
Just kind of adding on to that. I mean, Kayla really hit it all, but I mean, we're at a huge forefront with this huge, you know, this huge switch to virtual work, and with all these students. And when I think about what the help the universities can do is just, again, helping them get acclimated to this idea of being in front of a computer at their home all day. And again, the virtual etiquette, kind of how do you present yourself? I mean, I know at Danaher, you know, we're usually on site, you know, creating these products to help people. And so going to working from home, you know, this is a great opportunity for students to learn how to really take care of their schedules, be organized, be productive. Because when you're working from home, it's so easy to get caught up with just kind of life. So kind of helping students become more organized and productive in their day-to-day. And again, the etiquette with kind of video conferencing and having productive meetings and how to get the most out of it would definitely be a huge help for industry professionals.
Great. Anybody else have a comment from the panelists before we go to some of the chat room questions?
I think, this is Seldrick again, I think it's just important to realize that, you know, this is different than some of, you know, anything that we've ever seen before. So, you know, I was working around 2001. I was, you know, in campus recruiting in 2008 during the financial crisis. And this is different than anything we've ever seen. And I think sometimes we can, if we're not careful, there can be a us versus them mentality, especially around the university relations or career services and campus recruiting. And so I think what's important, or what we try to do, and Kayla hit it, is, you know, a lot of employers are trying to run a business, but they're also trying to take care of their people. And I think, you know, there are some folks who have made it to go, you know, to locate in different locations. Many of us have families, folks in nursing homes, other things. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking about all of that for our people, but also I think the more we can partner with our career services friends and connect with students in a human way, I think the better. I know we hosted a conversation with about 71 students today where we're starting to have some initial conversations and getting them prepared for the 2021 recruitment cycle. And so a lot of that work hasn't stopped. We want to provide educational opportunities. We want to reach out to diverse communities. We want to provide that touch and that human connection. And we have worked with a number of colleges and universities to understand, what's campus like now? When are students coming back? Or do you know what it's going to be like? Does that change our recruitment cycle in the fall? What advice do you have for us? And so I think, there are a lot of things that are on the table and we're all figuring it all out. But I think, it's really important for me at least, and what I'm managing my team to do is making sure that we keep that human element to make sure that we all have loved ones that we want to care for. And I think that's helped us as a firm not lose sight of all of the things that students have to think through for now and for their future. So not just a black and white career trajectory, but how does their life today impact their life tomorrow, and how can we be a part of that experience?
Great, thank you, Seldrick. There's a lot of chatter going on right now asking about the possibility of micro internships. How viable are they? Are any of the panelists considering moving to that type of program, or what are you hearing about micro internships from some of your peers in the university relations space? Is there anybody who can speak to that within our panelist group?
David, it's Bruce. I'll jump in, and I know that as folks get creative and understand what sort of experience they can still provide to folks, some folks are starting to condense their typical 10 to 12 week internship into smaller, maybe 1 to 2 week experiences that they're planning for later in the summer when hopefully offices and are reopening and things like that. So I definitely think there are some companies that I've been in touch with that are trying to figure out how they can still give an individual some sort of experience and exposure to their company and folks down the line. This is in addition to any sort of virtual experience that they're also trying to provide. I also think that from an internship perspective, right? The notion of internships typically really, you look to give students practical work experience and projects. You look to give them opportunities for training and development, and you look to give them, opportunities to build their professional network. All at the same time, most likely it being a pipeline to full-time employment. And if you would ask companies, last year, what is your percentage of real project work, training and development, and networking? The crux of it was probably going to be this tangible project that you were working on and having to deliver. I think this year we're probably going to see that flip a bit, right? Companies might put a little bit more of an emphasis on training and development. So this almost becomes a credential or competency sort of based internship where they're really focused on the learning and development piece and maybe not so much on a certain project. So the more I hear about these micro internships, these short bursts, they're taking a little bit more of a learning and development lens to them so that the student can walk away and build their resume in a way that still showcases something to, the employers that they hope to meet in the fall. So.
Yeah, and to add a little bit more to that, I do think, for some companies, they can really lift and shift their internship and make it virtual. I think about tech companies that their tech resources that are programming, there's not going to be as much challenge with that. I think where we'll start to see some of these micro internships happening are in the roles that you can't just lift and shift the work, that companies are having to get creative. And I've seen a couple questions come through the chat about creativity in here, and I think definitely micro internships is one of them. But I do think that companies are looking for ways to make students feel whole in the instance that they do cancel. And when you take a step back and look at what is it that a student is trying to derive from an internship experience, it's one, they're probably anticipating to get the pay and they might need it to make rent. So that's factor number one. And then two is they're hoping to learn something new. They're hoping to gain an experience. They're hoping to, learn about a company or an organization or get that opportunity for a pipeline into a full-time opportunity. So those are the things that by canceling an internship, you're removing from the student. So how can you fill those gaps? Well, one, you can create micro internships. You can give them access to training. Creatively, we've talked about, potentially if we were to cancel when we're looking at different options, like a virtual event that we're already hosting for our current interns, why couldn't we have maybe some of the external students join into some of that so they could still learn about our culture and get some of that experience, even if they're not working on a specific project? And I'll take a step back to say, at SAS, we're very unique in that some of our internships, we have landscaping interns that help on the grounds over the course of the summer. We have a child camp, a camp for our employees' children that the university recruiting team usually hires the camp counselors to really be the staff for this camp. And some of this work, if it can't be lifted and shifted into a virtual environment, we're going to have to get creative. And what is that experience going to look like? We have tossed ideas around stipends. Should we provide a stipend to a student? I've seen some employers doing that. A large tech employer I just read this morning was giving $5,000 stipends across the board to any intern whose internship was canceled. But I do think employers do owe it back to the student to fill those gaps if they are going to move in a direction that's not providing them what they were hoping to get out of their internship. And that's really on us as employers to really work through that, whether it be micro internships, whether it be stipends, whether it be job shadowing opportunities, events that they can log into, free training. There's a lot of options out there. But I've seen a lot of creative ideas coming out of companies so far.
Great, thank you, Kaylin. I think you're going to see a lot of these creative strategies being marketed very heavily once things start to hopefully return to normal. Speaking of marketing, a number of people have been asking, are there certain marketing strategies or branding activities that are otherwise having to be rethought for the spring semester? In other words, are there things that you had planned on doing at your respective campuses that you've had to rethink other than just the standard interviewing and going to career fairs and things like that?
I can start. I know for us and for the division that I support, we hire students all across the country. So in a variety of cities across the country. And so, there is not from what I understand, an asset and wealth management major at any university that I've seen. And so we have to do a lot of marketing. And I also look at marketing as education. And especially, I'm definitely have had a lot of work. I've done a lot of work with a lot of diversity organizations. I'm a product of a diversity organization, and a lot of times there may be an exposure gap, or at least for me coming up through college and then landing an internship. And so a lot of work that we have to do is just educating students on the opportunities that are available. And so we definitely have had to pivot to try and figure out, how do we do that differently? If we're not physically on campus, how do we turn that into possibly a virtual environment? Recently, we were going to host hundreds of students at a particular event to do just that education piece. And so we can't do it anymore. So we've broken it up into a series where we're going to have conversations with individuals. And then we also have to do that for different locations and help people understand we have opportunities in Atlanta and Baton Rouge and San Diego, so on and so forth. And so how do you get that message across, and how do you get people to understand that there's an opportunity for you, and it doesn't matter what major you are majoring in. So we have to think through a lot of those things. And fortunately, technology is in a place where tools are a lot easier to use, but it's an adjustment for a lot of people. And we're managing through, but most definitely we've had to kind of rethink, how do we get the word out? How do we get people interested? How do we partner with colleges, universities, students, organizations on campus, et cetera?
I'll just chime in. One thing that we did with Danaher that seemed to resonate pretty well was we had typically do like, coffee chats or tailgates at some events. But I know one of our MBA campuses, we had like a virtual happy hour. So we had one of our senior leaders just host a happy hour, everyone that was 21 and up, and just had a, very casual, just kind of, hey, this is what I do. This is kind of how we've been going about, coronavirus. This is what we look for program associates for our general management development program, our HR development program, or whichever kind of program. And just kind of having that kind of casual space, he was drinking a beer, it kind of helped them put them at ease and still had that sense of engagement. While, not exactly on campus, it still helped to encourage the students like, hey, we're thinking about you, you're still doing something. We still want you to learn more about us. Just one thing that we've done that seemed to work.
Right. One comment I'll also make, because it's coming up on the chat board quite a bit, and I'll just speak to it really quickly from personal experience, is that there do seem to be a lot of schools that are putting together panels very similar to what we're doing here, where they're bringing together a lot of their top employers to address similar types of questions from students. So I thought maybe we should point that out because it is coming up quite a bit on the chat. One thing I will ask of each of the panelists on here, just one quick question. There are a number of folks that would like to know what video interviewing tool each of your respective organizations is using. We do a quick poll, Bruce.
Yeah, so we're using a combination of Skype and Zoom. And if for some reason all else fails, FaceTime as well. So just trying to give the student the best and most stable platform really on their end to make sure that they have the best experience to put their interview foot forward.
We use Microsoft Teams. That's our general kind of interviewing and just nature of business. But if contingencies, yeah, Skype or FaceTiming.
So prior to the COVID changes, we were already a customer of HireVue video interviewing. They have kind of two components of what you can do. You can do on-demand video interviewing, which I know students don't love, but it really does allow us to get a lot of great insight into the student, much more than we can from just a resume and learning about who they are and their background. So we have the video kind of recorded through HireVue, but then they do have a live component as well, very similar to what we're doing right now. Unfortunately, HireVue has some limitations in terms of how many people can be on the technology at a time. So when we had to implement quickly video interviewing all across the globe for every position, regardless of level, we did create a global standard process using Microsoft Teams as well. So for university recruiting, it's pretty much HireVue, but for all other positions, it's MS Teams.
For us, for our interviewing process, we tend to use HireVue quite a bit. We also use Blue Jeans as a platform. In addition, we are using Zoom as a platform, excuse me, and then whatever method is necessary. So if we need to do FaceTime or if we need to just pick up the phone and have a traditional phone call without video, we'll make it work. But those are some of the platforms we're using.
Great, thank you, everybody. There's a number of folks that are asking for some just general advice, knowing how discouraged students are right now with what's going on with the pandemic, and in particular, those students that have had offers withdrawn in the last few weeks or so. What advice does each panelist have for those populations?
I saw an amazing post on LinkedIn just this morning. I feel like every time I'm scrolling through LinkedIn, there's another post either from an employer or a student talking about internships being rescinded. And I'll see if I can find the post. Aaron, maybe I'll send it to you to include in the follow-up notes. But there is a gentleman who wrote a post about surviving the 2009 crisis and that his internship got canceled in the 2009 financial crisis. And he is now a CEO of a startup, and he has opened it up. If any student's internship is canceled, they created an email address and said, tell us what you would want to do this summer, and we'll review it and see if we can make it happen. There are a lot of companies and a lot of people that want to help and that are helping out there right now in the market. And the amount that people are wanting to help is just incredibly encouraging. So it's really about uncovering some of those items, uncovering some of those opportunities for your students. I mean, that was just something I landed on through a LinkedIn post, and that would be a great thing to send out to students that are maybe not as encouraged. I know at SAS this Friday, our team's going to be writing a blog post on what to do if your internship is canceled for interns that we plan to send out to our career services partners for you all to use as well, just as a nice guide and resource. But there's so much out there from other university recruiting teams and companies that are passionate about this, that there are things out there that you could be sharing with your students. It just might take a little bit of searching and landing on some of it. But anything that I know of or this blog, again, happy to share it to Erin if you want to share it out, or I can post it in the NACE communities if you all are active in there as well.
Great.
I think if I were to think of what happened to a student that had a withdrawn offer, apply to Danaher. Shameless plug. We have opportunities, but kind of to Kayla's point, I saw, so this wasn't even related to coronavirus, but the student had their internship withdrawn and posted on LinkedIn how disappointed they were and how they don't really have a plan. And I saw at least like 30 companies reach out to saying, hey, like you look like you'd be a great fit for our position, our internship, what have you. So please take a look at us. We'd love to connect. So just something like that. It was very casual. Just, hey, I'm disappointed this happened to me. I'm still looking for an internship. Please help. And they got a ton of responses. So I think that was a huge, big win for them, just getting that exposure right there. So I think definitely something to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you. Celdric, any additional advice there, or Bruce?
I would just say, I think the biggest thing, and this can go across many different questions, is just the more we can do to keep ourselves, each other, our students, our colleagues encouraged, I think the better. I think, and that may be hard to think through or hard to say, but I do think, I got an email exchange to a candidate, or from a candidate today, who just wanted to touch base. And so he said, hey, just want to touch base with you. Want to let you know what I'm up to this summer. I got an email the other day from someone who said, unfortunately, he wasn't going to go with us. He had another offer. So companies are still hiring. There's still a lot of activity that is happening in the marketplace. And so while there may be a lot of things that companies are responding to, there still is a lot of activity. I know the recruiters on my team are busy, and we're figuring things out. But I would just say, the more we can do to keep people encouraged, I think we're going to see a lot more flexibility. Every day there's going to be a new development. There's going to be a new opportunity that didn't exist the day before. So, we just got to pay attention and be open, but understand that there's still a lot of things that are happening and remain positive.
And real quick, I saw the questions coming through. The gentleman is the co-founder at Lever Edge, LEVEREDGE, who requested any canceled interns to send an email. So he has a post on his LinkedIn. His name is Christopher ABKARIANS. He's going to get a lot of requests, I think, after this.
That's awesome. I think we've got time for maybe one more question before we toss it back to Sean and the NACE staff to close. There seem to be a lot of questions asking about what is it that companies are doing to prep their managers for the challenges of actually managing interns in a virtual environment, and if there's advice you have to the students in terms of how to work in that type of environment.
Dave, I'll start. It's Bruce, with Travelers, and I would say, before we, interns are our employees in that sense, right? We have put together a host of documents right now for employees and managers for our current staff. So we're actually leveraging those because, this is not just the interns that are impacted by this virtual work. It's our current staff as well. So I think a lot of, companies are developing those guides and internal resources for their current staff and current managers to use. So we are using that as sort of our template and foundational building blocks. We're going to build it out a little bit more with some information that might be pursuant to the first time someone's been in a corporate environment. but we're not necessarily going to recreate the wheel, because we feel like the information that we're dispersing to our employees and current managers of those employees will be very much applicable, to the intern audience as well.
I'll say I was on a call yesterday. Time has slipped away from me too, unfortunately, Bruce. It was either yesterday or the day before. But Cisco was on the call, and they made the really great recommendation of reaching out to the web technology platform that you use within your organization and seeing if they already have some resources that you could just plug and play away on. And although it won't be how to effectively manage an intern, it could be best practices of using the technology to the point of not having to recreate the wheel. Those companies right now are really seeing a spike in use of their platforms, and they want it to be successful. So they already have a lot of best practices documents to be able to pull from too. I thought that was great advice from Cisco.
Yeah, similar for Danaher. We have a SharePoint site, where we have all of our standard work relative to internship programs, full-time programs. Have a touch base with those managers, like, hey, you have an intern coming in. Direct into the SharePoint site where we have like a checklist of all the onboarding kind of action items that need to take place by when, kind of an overview of the kind of programmatic experience, kind of, as the manager, what do you need to do for these particular action items, or what's something that you can just, you don't have to take action on. So I think just they already have all this stuff going on with COVID. Now they have this new intern they're trying to onboard. I think from a UR perspective, if we can take as much of a lift from that for them as possible, we'll just kind of put them at ease. So I feel that's been something we've been doing that's been really helpful for the managers. And then similar for the incoming interns and incoming full-time associates, similar in vein, have as I mentioned, the group me, share our documents related to all the programmatic experience they can expect, the plan that we have in place for any potential virtual transitions. So just keep them aware has been helpful.
The only thing I would add is we're doing all of those things, making sure that we have our arms around the managers that will be managing the interns, but we're also partnering very heavily with folks that are active and super engaged within our business resource groups, or they may be called employee resource groups. But for instance, our Black Leadership Forum, our Asian Forum, our Women's Forum, Persons with Disability Forum, so on and so forth, so that interns and managers have resources and it's not a one person's job to be successful throughout this whole process. We want to make sure that people get a very comprehensive, but also get a very supportive experience throughout this experience.
Any other comments from any of the panelists before we toss it back to our fearless leader, Sean Vanderzeel? Going. Back to you, Sean. Thank you.
Wow, awesome. Thanks, everybody. What a great panel today. We really appreciate your insight and everyone's participation in the chat and Q&A. And I realized that we weren't able to get to everything. There were so many great questions and comments coming through. I'm sure the panelists would be happy to answer some of those if you want to go directly to them through LinkedIn or other sources. So for some of those resources. Also, I want to encourage you, we want you to continue this dialogue. We have a number of ways to do that. So we have our virtual roundtables that are taking place. If you go to the NACE web website, you can sign up for those virtual sessions so you can continue dialogue with your colleagues. Those are filling up quickly. If they do completely fill up, we'll start scheduling some more. We also have 4 other town hall meetings coming up on specific topics. So I hope you'll take a look at those. The next one is on engaging students virtually. So I think many of you are asking questions around that today. That might be a great session to do some of this follow-up. We also have a session on data collection, specifically the first destinations. That'll be the next one. So I hope you'll join us for that, as that's another hot topic. The last point I'd like to make is the quick poll. We've had amazing response to our next quick poll already. We already have 15% of our membership responding to those just after a day of launch. So we're going to post those results as they come in. So we will have those up on our website tomorrow morning. You'll be able to view those right on the NACE web website. And I encourage you to go to the NACE community to continue dialogue virtually. Posted there are many resources that our members are posting, particularly around platforms that they're using, guides that they're using, presentations that they're making. we are posting those resources on both the NACE community and through the NACE web website. So please check out those resources. And we look forward to seeing you at our next program. Be safe, be well, everybody. And thank you to our panelists today. You did an awesome job. Have a great one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye. Take care.
Be safe.